Despite the buzz, Andor's rating was reported to be one of the lowest among the Disney Plus series. People blamed the modern audience's impatience, their inability to handle the lack of explosions, lightsabers, fan services, and Star Wars iconography. People blamed the show for being centered on Cassian Andor, a character people didn't give a shit. People blamed the tone for being too dark and serious. People blamed it for being released right after the disappointments of other Star Wars shows like The Book of Boba Fett and Obi-Wan Kenobi, so Andor was getting punished for the sins of its predecessors. I can point to a much simpler problem. Andor lacks the dramatic hook. The show does become good halfway through, but people are talking about this show like it is the second coming of Christ. Sorry to break up the circle jerk, but I also found the initial episodes boring, and this is coming from someone who enjoys slow-paced movies and series and wanted Andor to be a slow show in contrast to the other Star Wars TV series. It is a drag to get through them. There are lots of sophisticated slow-burn stories out there that still manage to hook a lot more audiences. It is easy to succumb to the impulse of, people are just dumb, as many fans have said, but it is not as simple as that.
My buddy texted me, quote, "If it's too slow, I don't know what to tell you. You have bad taste and are a child." Close quote. What a jerk! What a jerk! But I kind of agree.
I swear people who spout takes like this only say them to look smart, and that's why they call people who thought the show was boring idiots who just want mindless action. I also love how the fanbase was absolutely cursing that show to fail before the release with rehashing the same dumbass complaints 5,000 times a day, like, it isn't new because it is set in the original trilogy era, who gives a shit about Cassian Andor? Wow, they are reusing the characters like Mon Mothma, therefore it is going to be a nostalgia bait. This is not about the sweeping space operatics of Star Wars, but the minutiae of galactic senators, therefore it is going to be boring. Then these people changed its stance. The same people now think it's on the same level as Better Call Saul, because they gotta fit in with the masses, but don't you think that it is getting a little bit desperate? I understand the appeal to Andor because of the shows like The Book of Boba Fett and Obi-Wan, and it got everything the adult audiences like, but there's absolutely no way it's one of the best shows ever made. It's not even the best show of the year. Andor is a sophisticated story, but it is not a particularly complex or inaccessible story. It is not a thought-provoking vibe piece like 2001, A Space Odyssey or Solaris. It is a grounded, easy-to-understand drama about a person who becomes compelled to rebel. It has been done in the past with the movies like The Battle of Algiers and Soy Cuba, two movies Andor's showrunners clearly watched. One is a mockumentary thriller and the other is a slow-paced drama, both about how normal people get radicalized for the revolution, with many POV characters going in and out in their own separate stories, but not a single wasted shot. It conveys the boiling social climate and the underground resistance activities deeper in their 2-hour runtimes. It is condescending to dismiss all these audiences as stupid viewers who aren't capable of getting Andor. Most of the viewers do get it. People just don't care because they expect the story to be able to get them invested in the show faster than it does, and that is a reasonable thing to expect. There is no reason that it needs to be so, quote, high IQ, end quote, that it turns off most audiences. It is fair to judge a story by how successfully it hooks audiences. That is an element of a good story. Inaccessibility is never necessary to make a story good, period. Most great slow-burn stories don't struggle to draw audiences into the beginning. This is why Disney has been forced to market Andor so hard since the show is failing to accrue viewers because it is simply too slow to start out, and here is the list of problems for why people are turning off before the show gets good. Ferrix is a set-up town. The Ferrix segment has the audience bounce around a lot of different uninteresting characters without a dramatic engine that encompasses all of these. Too many scenes just go by without any tension, conflict, or payoff. It is static. There is no significant plot beat. We move from a talking scene to a talking scene without a pull, something that draws the audience to the purpose of the story. There are too many characters standing around just talking to each other. I am not asking for the Ferrix segment to be super fast-paced or that the show to wrap everything up perfectly. All plotlines do not have to be wrapped up right away, but the stuff the audience watched 3 episodes ago is suddenly forgotten about or irrelevant. It takes several hours and flashbacks before you understand what the protagonist is even trying to do and what his motivations are. There is a sweet spot between stretching the story out and immediate gratification. Townspeople are not compelling. If we like the characters enough, then we could get through them no matter how gradual the plot is. The pilots of Better Call Saul and Game of Thrones were slow, full of conversations, and didn't have a strong plot hook, but they had a strong cast of characters. They follow fascinating, unique characters, who drive their own stories, facing thought-provoking dilemmas. I can recount a couple of great scenes in those pilots. Where is that here? The characters are barely active. Despite devoting most of the runtime to them, I never felt I was getting to know them to a meaningful degree. They are given half-assed characterization and go through a wiki-like checklist of what they need to go through. The characters at Ferrix all feel the same, grumpy and head down, equally moody. Everyone barely shows any emotion. Everyone is muted. Everyone speaks monotone. Everyone looks serious. It would be okay if 1 or 2 characters are like this, but the show has a mountain of characters acting in the same manner on the lifeless planet. If the cast fails to attract the audience in the pilot, you will have a tough time maintaining the viewer's attention. Cassian Andor is the 5th most interesting protagonist in the show. Cassian is the most boring lead. His involvement in the rebellion is caused by circumstances more than by his actual desire to join the fight. He is just a dude trying to get by but swept up by bigger events surrounded by the actually interesting characters. Throughout his adventure, Cassian is passive, he is merely told things and reacts, and there are rarely hard choices to make. He has no real agency except when he is running away. I get that is part of his arc, but the characters and stories of Cyril, Luthen, Deidre, Mon Mothma are 10 times more compelling and active as the POV characters put themselves in far more gripping predicaments, which is why the latter half of the show shines. That's when the show has a constant momentum, small subtle relationships that either forge or break. The first 2 episodes focus on Cassian Andor in the boring backdrop where nothing really happens. Under no circumstances can the literal title character of your show be the 5th or 6th most memorable character in the show. He barely reacts or displays complex emotions, which doesn't exactly work when the audience is supposed to empathize with him. Go back and watch him killing the cops. There is some good character stuff that could have come out of this, like spending some time with just him as he comes to terms with his deed. Yet after he arrives at Ferrix, he shrugs the murder off. Something terrible has happened, and he doesn't even show off his emotions afterward. He just acts grumpy. Audiences tend to not like grumpy protagonists, so good stories justify why they're grumpy in the introduction, like Joel from The Last of Us, Carl from Up, and God of War, if one played the previous games. Flashback. Andor attempts to make the audience care about Andor with flashbacks, which make everything more confusing. Not confusing as to the plot, the audience can understand what is happening, but we don't understand why the show is showing this to us. The first episode ends with a flashback back to the days when Andor lived with his sister in the tribe of survivors. There was too much focus on the constant flashbacks without any clear indication of what Andor actually wants. We were not given anything about his motivations for a long stretch of time. There are works that utilize flashbacks to great effect. The flashbacks in Better Call Saul, One Piece, Lost, Berserk, and Cowboy Bebop are no joke. The creators use them in amazing ways to provide dramatic weight to characters and plotlines, making the audience understand a character and hate a villain. This is the difference between characterization, aka understanding the actual character, from character development, the changes the character goes through. A character changing in itself doesn't really make for good characterization nor good character development. The changes need to be organic, natural, and be consistent. In contrast, the flashbacks in Andor don't really provide or explore the questions and answers. It tells you that he is broken because of her lost sister. On paper, his character development might sound good, but the actual execution of it lacks. I understood more about Andor's character in the brief introduction he had in Rogue One than I did in the entirety of the flashbacks in this show. It is because Andor reduces all that to provide a basic rundown but does not take the time to explore the character moments. Worse, by episode 3, his rebel journey disconnects from his sister journey immediately. He joins Luthen's team as a mercenary to avoid getting killed. This arc is disconnected from his search for his lost sister, which is just not the point of the show, or even really that interesting. You can watch episode 1's opening and episode 3, and cut all the middle, then you are not missing out much. When a pilot ends, the audience should feel they cannot wait until the next episode. 2 episodes in, Cassian is talking to his ex, her boyfriend, and his stepmother, and none of these characters is compelling, so I nearly tapped out. I could have dropped Andor if there was no episode 3, which is the turning point where the show gets its shit together and begins to be good. I ended up enjoying the show afterward, and almost loving it by the time the season ended, but the way the first 3 episodes were structured does not do any favor. Hooks. A good premise contains 2 great hooks, a character hook and a plot hook. Just summarizing it should be intriguing enough to make you watch. Let's see some of the acclaimed slow-paced grim thriller shows, revolving around the disillusioned protagonist who goes through self-discovery and transformation, compelled to abandon his past life to take a dangerous journey out of his will. These series nailed their beginnings and received a lot of undeserved criticism for opening too slowly. In Naoki Urasawa's Monster, Dr. Tenma is a prestigious neurosurgeon who is struggling between success and conscience as a doctor, so he disobeys the hospital's order to perform brain surgery on a mayor, choosing instead to operate on a newly orphaned boy, who arrived first. He risks his promising future for his conscience. The mayor dies, and so does Tenma's reputation. Years later, it turns out that boy has grown to be a psychopathic serial killer and has gone missing with his twin sister. Out of guilt, Tenma goes on a journey across Europe to stop the boy. In Breaking Bad, Walter White, once a genius PhD in chemistry from Caltech who made contributions to the Nobel Prize, lost everything and became a normal high school chemistry teacher. He then gets diagnosed with stage 3 lung cancer, so he tries his hand at manufacturing meth to make money to pay for his treatment and his family, then discovers that being a drug lord gives him the power and respect he always wanted, even if he has to lose his soul and life in the process. These hooks allow for in-depth characterization and agency, stake over their decisions, map out danger ahead, and lay out a clear goal, which boosts the plot engine forward because of urgency. A ton of information is given to us in the pilots. We know exactly where the protagonists are coming from and why they are doing this, even though we haven't been given much about the backstory. The audience understands why these characters feel the way they do and why they are risking their life doing the adventure. Instead of constantly interrupting the flow of the story with flashbacks, these shows simply explore it over the course of the story, which in itself doesn't jump around in time and develops the protagonists on screen while also having an individual character going through their own stuff. Andor's premise has two dramatic hooks for this series, and they are all lackluster. The first is that Cassian is looking for his lost long sister. It is the literal first thing the titular character cares about. It's not nearly as compelling because, not only we don't care enough for the relationship between him and his sister, there is not a single good scene in the flashback, but his sister is not lost due to the Empire. In fact, we don't even know what exactly happened to her. Like, what even happened to Kenari? This was what kicks off Cassian's motive. The finale could have closed up that loose thread, but this is only mentioned once later on in the season in an off-the-cuff remark. I thought there was going to be some reveal in the latter episodes, it is never mentioned again. His sister is just left behind, and that is the end of the story. All I thought of is, so what? Evidently, Cassian has been doing just fine for 20 years. Is that a big enough hook to keep watching? Maybe in the flashback, if we see Cassian explicitly witnessing his sister getting kidnapped by the Imperials, then that might work. That would relate to his hatred of the Empire and set up a clear, urgent harm for his sister. The second hook is that in the process of searching for his sister, Cassian murders the Corpo cops out of spite, so the corporate inspector begins looking for him. This is still a weak hook. It does not give the audience anything about Andor's motivations, and that is what matters more because he's the main character of the story. However, the show could take advantage of this by putting potential danger around every corner every time Cassian walks out, which can heighten the tension whenever he is in a scene. However, the show doesn't do that. Cassian is not aware that the bad guys are pursuing him, and we know the bad guys are not on Ferrix until episode 3, so Cassian is basically inactive. Again, this is not a big enough hook to keep watching. So it's time to fix the first 3 episodes to make the story more compelling. Cassian's past. Some fairly simple changes could be made to the first 3 episodes to fix those issues, and one thing to do is take those damned flashbacks out. Start off the show with the flashback contents in a linear fashion. No teasing, just unload Andor's backstory in its entirety. This effectively removes the scattered flashbacks that constantly halt the momentum of the show, but instead make it into a 15-minute show opener about Andor's childhood. There are stories that have a specific story reason you need to artistically hide the protagonist's motivation, but Andor is not one of those stories. I enjoy watching slow burns, but slow burn does not mean you have to hide the character's motivations behind flashbacks and a slow trickle of introductions to who they are as a person. The story isn't made better by concealing Andor's motives or drives into the scattered flashbacks. All this time spent on the flashbacks doesn't tell us anything the audience could not have already imagined ourselves. We already know from Rogue One what his drives end up being, and these are not complicated motives. The story of the show is about how he gets there, of course, but there is no reason we need to wait several episodes to find out his basic motives at the start. In this backstory segment, there is another change to make. Make the Kenari segment actually relevant to the rest of the story. I still don't understand why they decided to make that ship separatist. What's the point? To show that the separatists are bad. They are not relevant to the story of Andor. The show casts 3 different actors from Chernobyl HBO, so I cannot be the only one who thought that the ship crash-landed and contaminated Kenari with chemical waste of some sort. Instead, the planet is labeled toxic due to the unrelated mining disaster, so, what's the point of this ship? Instead of making the transport ship separatist, make it a Republic ship, which later becomes the Empire after the Clone Wars. Make it clear that the transport was carrying the chemical herbicide or defoliant, a la Agent Orange, as part of its herbicidal warfare program. The crash leads to damaging environmental disasters on Kenari. Child survivors witness the surrounding trees dying. When one of the kids dies after drinking spring water, it prompts them to investigate the crash site. They arrive at the wreckage and kill the lone surviving officer as happened in the show, but let us dial the hook and the stakes up. Marva and Clem Andor arrive and come to face with Cassian, and here, it is revealed that these two are aligned with the Separatists and the ones who shot down the Republic transport. Soon, the Republic reinforcements arrive at the planet to investigate the crash, and in the process, kill Cassian's friends and capture his sister, Carrie. They will come for Cassian next. Weighed with a heavy responsibility and guilt, Marva takes Cassian to a frantic escape. This change makes the story much more dramatic by showing off the terrible consequences and ending with a shocking cliffhanger. The show shows the fate of Kenari getting contaminated. It makes it very, very clear something terrible has happened to his sister as Cassian directly witnesses her getting kidnapped. It sets up Cassian's deep resentment toward the Empire and Marva, who caused the catastrophe and separated him from his beloved sister. Basically, we learn what his drive is from the start. Making the scenes on Morlana 1 crucial. We then move into the present-day midpoint of the pilot episode, and we follow Cassian Andor onto Morlana 1. The ways the show played this section, he went there to ask a prostitute about the whereabouts of his long-lost sister. She says the girl from Kenari worked in the brothel, and that is all Cassian learns about Carrie. Cassian leaves, kills the harassing cops, and departs the planet. Is that all there is to this planet? They skimmed over many of the possible subtleties and nuances that could have made the world and the characters more genuine and impactful. Gilroy could have easily flexed his writing chops and used this location more. Let's put the booster on Cassian's goal on Morlana 1. With the talk with the prostitute going nowhere, she says that the corporate authority has established a surveillance system on this planet that enforces strict laws on areas in its jurisdiction, as well as the tracking of the individual citizens in the area by using the chain code. This means the corporation's vault must contain information on his sister's whereabouts. However, no one can access to the information storage. Not even the high-ranking Morlana authority officers have an access. Cassian has an idea. He plans a heist on Preox Morlana authority's data storage. The rest of the episode should be about Cassian plotting out a heist looking for an entrance point, where the guards are, and the exit route. It seems to be more difficult than he imagined, so he persuades a local safecracker into the job. It is revealed that this safecracker once helped the rebels in a gig, so he is motivated to erase his own chain code that hinders his underground activities. The episode ends with a strong cliffhanger of the two devising an ingenious plan to break into the Corpo vault and disable its sophisticated alarm system. The first half of episode 2 is about the data heist, and you can do a lot of suspenseful stuff. The scheme contains the sci-fi Star Wars gears in breaking into the vault but also has to feel small and grounded. Nothing like Diego Luna pulling Tom Cruise or The Italian Job, but something like a sci-fi version of the methodical heists from Rafifi, Stanley Kubrick's The Killing, Michael Mann's Thief, or Le Cercle Rouge to fit the show's pacing. However, the heist goes wrong, the alarm is raised, and the safecracker is shot dead. Cassian kills 2 guards during the escape but manages to secure a data card of chain code. He crossed the point of no return. And before I continue, I know for a fact that some people will tell me, it's about characters. Why are you putting more action scenes into Andor? You just want the character to pull out a gun and kill hundreds of people. I have seen this response to the criticisms toward the show's lack of tension. I am not turning Cassian into John Wick. Nobody is saying they want action all the time. Stop strawmanning what people are criticizing. It seems people are jumping to defend this show from all criticisms for some reason. When have people suddenly decided action scenes are a bad thing? There are many fictions that feature a protagonist who does not massacre hundreds, yet they have palpable suspense throughout the runtime and balance the slow, quiet moments with intense set pieces then showing us who these characters are through violence. Because action scenes are character actions, too. The audience feels the characters and the relationship through actions and subtext. The nail-biting thriller quality is not just there to raise the stakes and show off the action scenes. It is there to let the audience sympathize Cassian and learn about his character more, letting us know how he misses his sister to this extent and how he is willing to go extreme. Sometimes, violence is the story. Violence is a sub-theme of the series and crucial to character arcs. Sometimes it is necessary to show where character motivations lie, or how far our characters are willing to go. Andor's world is a brutal world, and when it does use violence, particularly so in this scenario, it does so to add to anxiety and desperation. This change also makes sense of why the Empire wants to close off Preox Morlana since this event has proven they cannot trust the security on the corporation. It also connects nicely to Luthen's motivation to recruit Cassian Andor for the bank heist later. The show says Cassian is dangerous, but how? It doesn't make much sense for Luthen to recruit some no-name cop killer for such a risky scheme. But if Cassian is someone with a track record of the heist. Now, the two segments intersect in a tight manner. The latter half of episode 2 should be devoted to Cassian looking for an advanced data reader that can decipher the data card, and getting to know Ferrex and Cassian's relationships with his colleagues alongside that goal. We also learn about his complex relationship with Marva, and how he resents her, yet cannot hate her. Then episode 2 ends with Cyril Karn figuring out where Cassian went to. Cassian's reason to join Luthen. Episode 3 can stay mostly the same since this is a payoff episode, but it needs an adjustment for Cassian's character. Make his search for his sister actually connect with him leaving Ferrex with Luthen. When Cassian meets Luthen, Luthen can elaborate on the power of the rebellion network and may give him the means to find his sister, but he can only let him join in if he chooses to do this robbery mission. This is important because it gives Cassian a reason to join Luthen's team. His journey to join and look for his sister is one and the same. It makes him active, not reactive in just fleeing from the Corpo Cops hunting team. He is motivated to do this job for his sister, whereas in the original Cassian is coincidentally happening to work as a mere mercenary, who is told to do it for no personal stakes. These fixes give Cassian a more active role in the plot and connect an irrelevant sister search to his transformation as a rebel. A more sensible, faster plotline in the first 3 episodes opens up more avenues for character development. This way, the journey is one continuous story, joining the rebellion for a personal reason to find his sister, then slowly radicalizing and genuinely fighting for the rebellion's cause.